on a brand new one of our brand new lounge areas where we can just pretty much relax and take a little break uh, from the day. And today we're going to have a special guest, Scott Robinson. He's a partner at the App Company, and of course we're going to have my fellow near Softian, Luis Ortiz, who's going to be doing the co-hosting. And I'll tell you all about Scott and Luis in a minute. Welcome, Scott. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Luis, as well. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Ben.
it so much. Okay. Now, I'd like to briefly introduce Scott Robinson. Scott is, well, he has founded a number of successful internet startups, including daytracker.com, which was sold to Franklin Covey and became the franklinplanner.com, and parenthoodweb.com, which was sold to United News and Media and is now parenthood.com. He has served on the board of directors of Pictosh, the leading digital lab solution for professional wedding photographers, and is currently an advisor to OpposingViews.com, among many other aspects of his professional endeavors. Scott, welcome to our show today. We really appreciate your having you here.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. It's great for us as well. Okay, Scott, I understand that you have chosen a quite unique topic, and it's of course, it's very up to date, needless to say, and it's called Ideas for a Startup: How to Create a Great Pitch and Avoid Common Pitfalls. The first thing that I'd like to ask you, Scott, is why did you choose this particular topic for this talk?
So, the company that I have founded now is called the App Company, and we've been in business pretty much when Apple started developing, when Apple started with the App Store. So we have a lot of experience in apps, and because our company is called the App Company, we were early on. We do really well in Google search, and I would say we probably get 5 or 6 inquiries a day of people that either want to partner with us, want us to build their app. Apps are a big thing, so I get stopped all the parties or in business meetings, and people always have an idea. I mean, everyone has the next big idea for apps. So I think I have a pretty good sense, both from the things I've done personally and invested in, and just ideas that people pitch. What makes a good idea, what is worth funding, what if you wanted to do it yourself, what's worth putting your time, effort, sweat equity in. And I also find a lot of flaws in things. Now, of course, nobody knows all the answers, and some people miss big. A lot of people had opportunities to invest in Facebook and Uber and missed out, and I have my misses too. But I think as a general rule, I might not know what's going to succeed, but I think I have a pretty good idea of what will likely fail, or what probably for a couple of reasons which I'll explain are really not worth putting the time and effort for apps. So I think I have a pretty good sense, both from the things I've done personally and making a nice wage, but everyone in the back of their minds has some idea. Everyone wants to build the next Snapchat, right? So I think it could be useful and interesting for me to kind of go through some of the things that we see that things that work and things that don't work.
Excellent. Okay. One of the aspects of your talk is, and I think it's one of the first one that's mentioned in all the information that we have been putting out there, is what are investors looking for when they're making a decision to fund ideas? What's the first thing that they set sight on when looking at something that they're going to be putting their hard-earned money into?
Sure. So, when someone's trying to come up with an idea, of course, it's the idea. What's this? I have the net. Everyone thinks, pitches usually start out, to me at least, I have the idea. It's the next billion-dollar company. So everyone is kind of focused on some idea, right? But at the end of the day, ideas are somewhat a dime a dozen. I mean, everyone has an idea, and in fact, if you go through the kind of big successes, what are they? Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and Uber and all these various ideas, are they YouTube, are they so unique? Probably not. I mean, most of these ideas are really kind of small little twists on something else. What makes something successful and what makes investors excited? Sure, it's the idea, but it's really the team and the ability to execute. Because at the end of the day, we start off with an idea, and then we're going to find a million pitfalls. There's the competition, things change that were unexpected, and we hear this word pivot a lot, but it's true. I mean, does the team have the ability to, A, put in the time and effort and the passion, but that they have the ability to react to market forces that they didn't foresee and kind of change their direction and succeed. So I don't know if any of you guys watch Shark Tank, but they always say on Shark Tank, I'm giving you my money. They're like my kids. You better take care of them, right? Mm-hmm. So that's really what they're looking for is a team that has passion, hopefully experience, ideally proven track record, which isn't always the case. And by the way, for your audience, it really isn't always focused on trying to get investor money, because sometimes investor money comes later on. I mean, you guys have the advantage of you don't necessarily need investor money, and I would stress to you guys it's probably best not to get investor money at first. The best thing you really could do is build something that works. And you guys don't necessarily have to hire technologists, right? You guys are that, and you have friends that do that, so you could start things out with a lot of sweat equity and kind of the Facebook model, right? Facebook, they did it themselves at first. I mean, it wasn't until they were successful in doing what they did in Harvard University till they finally started attracting money. But money was the last thing. And the problem is, with money requires a lot of responsibility, and you then have someone that you're have to answer to. So in some respects, the pitch and raising money should be something down the road. Try to do something yourselves that you kind of prove your concept. So that would be a big part.
Mm-hmm. From what? Okay, thank you, Scott. From what you're saying, this is what I understand. You understand that the teams who were working on a specific technology project or startup should focus initially on an MVP. I mean, that's like the first thing that they should focus on, and the MVP should be self-sustained or self-funded. Am I right?
That's true. So we have a couple of things, right? We have these kind of like pre-rev. We have at the very one extreme we have ideas, right? And you see them sometimes. Someone just has some idea, and that's kind of more of the rarity, right? To get the idea funded. Then, as you're saying, you have like an MVP. You have some proof of concept product. Maybe you don't have yet a customer, but at least it's something that works, especially if it's technology and it's something that you could patent. That's patent ability to protect an idea. Those are all really important. But let me just bring up one thing that investors love that I think that is something to build for. Can you do something that is good enough to actually attract somebody that's willing to pay? Okay? And who that something is means something also. Is it a real company? Is it a company that has other options, not just a family or friend type thing or a few people you find on the internet that buy your T-shirt, for example? But is it a real company that has a need and you get them to pay? Paying customers to me is huge. So if you could kind of build to that, even if you're not making a ton of money, but you've proved that someone that is in your target market is willing to pay you for it, that's a big thing that people look for.
And okay, specifically about the paying part, should a project should be creator driven or market driven? And I'm asking this because sometimes, and I've talked to people who think that they have this great idea and they're convinced that they're going to somehow drive their target market to pay for it eventually, because they are convinced it's a great idea, and the world is going to find out sooner than later that it's something that they cannot live without. They're so convinced that they're also convinced that they can have someone pay for it. Maybe that's not always the case. So at what point in time would you suggest a reality check so as not to try to avoid as much as possible the pitfalls?
Well, it's a great question. So the first thing I would say is the time is really before you spend a lot of time and money even doing anything to try to figure out, is this something that the market will want? And which leads me to another thing that I think is critical. We often get pitched ideas by people that think that they have an idea, they think it's a great idea, but they have no experience in the market. Okay? So, so my analogy is you go on a plane tomorrow, you're sitting in this, Boeing 747, and you look around and you notice the configuration or the way the wings are or the seats or whatever. But you never say to yourself, hey, I'm going to build a better plane and compete with Boeing, right? We just know inherently we can't compete with them, right? It'd be billions of dollars, and we would never do it. But yet, for web technologies and app technologies, people think, hey, I have this better idea. I know this market better than the people that live and breathe the market, and I know the customer. I know what they want. I'm going to do it, because most people's ideas are not related to what they know. And I think that's a huge problem, and I could give you a personal example of that in a second, but that is something that we see all the time, where people are pitching us ideas, but they're not even in the market. I got a call through a guy that I respect who met this guy, and he called me, wanted some advice. So he bought this technology. It's in the kind of sound marketing, having to do with sound. And he bought this technology, and he's been spending the last 2 years of his life trying to make it into a product. But he knows nothing about this business. The market is advertising agencies. He knows nothing about advertising agencies. And he's just been spending 2 years of his life on this idea, but he doesn't know the market. And I'm like, what is it that you are an expert in? And he's an experienced guy, and he's an expert in a bunch of things. And I'm like, it's not that I'm an expert in advertising and marketing, but I have a good deal of experience. And it was clear to me that he has this idea. And by the way, he has talked to people in the market, and most of them are lukewarm to his idea. And he was so keen on his idea, he just didn't want to hear what the people that would buy it are saying to him. And part of that is because he doesn't know that market, right? He thought the technology was cool, but it doesn't really understand the market. So what I would say is, if you have this greatest idea and you think it's going to solve a problem, sure. But I think it's much better to focus on something you know and figure out, how to disrupt that market, how you do something better in that market, what's missing. But rather than having to learn the market, having to, meet the people, figure out all the players, it's a very difficult road that way. As a personal experience, so we're the app company, and one of our big technologies is something we call the game day platform. So basically, we build apps. It's kind of a combination of app CMS platform for sporting events. So we do a lot of college athletics, like USC, University of Southern California. All of their athletic program is built on it. We have a bunch of other Pac-12 schools that use it. We're starting to get big in the tennis field. We do the Rogers Cup, which is the big tennis event in Canada. We do the Indian Wells Tennis Tournament, which is the second biggest tournament in the United States. But real quick, when we got into this business, we did it through a relationship I have, we got the opportunity early on to build this platform for USC. And part of the deal we had, because we never, at the time, we were just building apps for the App Store with the goal of, the next multi-million-dollar app. That was our goal. We had never built apps for other companies. But when we did this, we kind of saw that there really wasn't anything good in the market, and we spoke to the people at USC, and they were very open to us building it as a platform, and then they were actually going to help us market it to other universities. And we were like, great. So we built it. USC had by far the best game day app out in the market. It's an app that if you're at the game, it tells you, where you get your food, shows you scores, you could blog, you could watch video. Before you go to the game, you could see live views of your seats. I mean, everything you want to know about, to help the experience when you're at the game. So we started marketing it. We had no experience in the college athletic business. So we started marketing it to schools all over the country, and we were like very naive. We were thinking, that there's no one that has a better app that does this. But we didn't understand the market. And there was a lot to understand. There was a lot of players in the market already not doing apps, but almost all of the universities use a common web platform. There's about 4 or 5 of them, 2 really big ones, but 4 or 5 platforms that every single university in the United States uses. Well, all of those companies were starting to get into apps, and some of them had contracts that essentially said, hey, we have the right of first refusal. If you're ever going to build any other technology, any apps, we have the right to do it. There's also a lot of the universities have marketing companies There's basically two really big ones that work with most universities that sell all the rights. Well, those companies also have kind of rights of first refusal to do anything to do with apps and websites and things like that. Plus, so for example, I won't name specific schools, but we got plenty of schools, but there were some really big universities where if you would have asked me, I'm sure all you guys do new business, you kind of go down the road and you think for sure you're going to get the business. I mean, everything was so positive. You had 4 or 5 meetings, all this great feedback. And then at the last second, we would lose the business. Well, why would we lose it? Usually, once it gets to the point where they're about to make the decision, someone in the university would hear about it, and some alumni that has a technology company would get called, and he would call the head person at the school and say, well, you can't use these guys. I mean, we're alumni. We give all this money to the school. Anyway, my point here is we ended up doing fine, and it was hard work. But would we have been better off in this industry to hire someone that already was in the industry, that knew that had relationships? Because everything at the end of the day is relationship driven. So we learned, and there was a lot of work, and we got into the business, and now we're pretty good big players in the business. But it isn't easy. All these industries have these entrenched players, relationships. There's probably trade shows, whatever it happens to be. You just need it. All these businesses are relationship businesses. So what I would say is, sure, the idea is big, but as you pointed out, the market is really important, and you better know your market before you, endeavor down the road.
Definitely. You better know where you're stepping into before you actually take the steps. All right. Luis, I understand that I have a whole bunch of questions here, and I think they're all they're all itching inside of me to let them out. But I don't want to take your slot, your own slot, Luis. So why don't you go ahead and ask yours? And also, I'd like to encourage the audience to send us their questions by clicking, if you're watching us from our YouTube channel or the website, just click on Be Part of the Conversation, and it'll take you straight to the Q&A prompt. And okay, Luis, over to you. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I do have a couple of questions already prepared, and reading your profile, and as I said to you before, you have this history in the software industry with websites, and now recently with apps, and it seems the same as with websites. Everyone wants to have their own website. Now everybody wants to have their own app. How do you recognize, or how do you say, this is a great app? This app is gonna make it. How do you know that you found a good idea that is worth working in?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing to say is that you never know. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, you have to be passionate about it, but there's no sure things. And in fact, as I pointed out to Carlos, often, what we think is going to be the idea turns into something else. So I think it is really important to be able to kind of pivot and understand, what's not working and what is working. But the next thing I'll say is, and I'm not going to. It's a great little analogy, but I'm not going to take credit for it. I've heard it. I used to be a member of something called Tech Coast Angels, which was the largest Southern California technology venture angel investing group. And when we would evaluate companies, people would come. We'd meet once a week. Companies would pitch us ideas, about 15 minutes apiece. They'd leave, and then we'd have lunch, and we would, brainstorm, what we thought were the best ideas that we'd invite back for another pitch. Mm-hmm. And we would always say, is that idea a vitamin or is it a painkiller? And I think that's something you always need to say to yourself. Is it a vitamin or a painkiller? So what we mean by that is this an idea that, like a vitamin, it would be nice to have, it probably in the long run is going to save me time or be good for me to use, but, if it's a vitamin, you're not as likely to be dying to use it. Or is it a painkiller, meaning, is that idea going to solve a problem, something that, just whether it's, causes you, not physical pain, but mental anguish because every day you have, you're spending all this time and extra effort. So is it going to be a painkiller? Is it going to solve a real problem? And I think to me, that's really what I always think about is this a vitamin or a painkiller? And I think everyone needs to ask that. So, the direct answer is, and it's kind of a funny answer for an app, but is this something that for your target market? So that's the key thing, right? It's like, nothing is for everybody. So who's the target market? So is this product, is this idea going to be so good for my target market that when they hear about it, they're going to instantly want to download it, A, and B, is it something they're going to kind of put on their first app screen, right, on the home screen of their phone. Is it that important for them? And by the way, one other thing, when you started off, you talked about websites.
Yeah.
Often we get pitched ideas that are really more websites than apps. So, like, if it's more of a marketing thing, it's really more of a website, because if it's more for an app is really for, if it's a business, it's more for customers, or if it's a standalone app, it's more for everyday things. But often, like, a new business wants an app. But think about it: you need someone to want it enough to download it, to keep it, to use it, to agree to allow you to send notifications to it, and that's really more something for an existing customer than it would be, so that's really more of a website.
Yeah. And it makes sense, the barriers of adoptions are greater with an app. And another question that I have, so now, what are the pains that you have when creating an app? How would you build, or what would be a great app development team, right? What are the profiles of the members that you could have there, and do you use any tool or methodology to work with them? Because I know now most of the teams work remotely. How do you handle those pains of development?
Sure. Well, even for us, right? So we tried to bring costs down somewhat by having most of our developers are in India, and we do as minimal amount of outsourcing. So we actually have full-time people in India that work for us. So you're right. I mean, the communication is key. So one thing that's big for us is to try to kind of get on the same time zone if we can. Now, obviously, with India, it's hard, but we do try to stagger, the work time. So at least for me, it's actually harder for us because we're on the West Coast. It would be easier when it's on the East Coast.
Yeah.
We try to make it so our guys work, come in later and work later, which is very helpful.
So some hours overlap. Right.
Yeah, so there needs to be a lot of overlap. I pointed out for us, we rather work with full-time employees. I mean, one of the things that we certainly do outsource, but the issue with outsourcing for us is that often, I wouldn't call it bait and switch, but often what happens is just natural. If the person isn't full-time and they're working for us, and they're really good, they usually get promoted, and they're no longer, working for us. And then the technology needs to be transferred. So again, we do it, but we try to do it, kind of minimize it. And when we do it, we try to do it with partners that we really trust and like. So it's we don't bring on new people too often. We try to keep the kind of design, management, and creative, the art stuff, the UI, UX. We try to keep that more local. So either they're people that are on our full-time team that are right here in LA that we work with daily, or kind of more near people that are closer to us, that are contractors to us. As you pointed out, tools are key. So we use a bunch of different tools. I mean, from sharing files through Dropbox and Google Drive. We use things like Basecamp. We use Trello. We're all on Skype. We often use GoToMeeting. Skype is somewhat unreliable, so we'll probably use GoToMeeting a little bit more than we use Skype. But yes, using tools, bug tracking tools, project management tools are really key to keep, just email threads really don't, hack it. Yeah. So, the more of this stuff, the better.
Got it. And you mentioned there for a brief moment UX, which I think for me is a subject or a topic that many people, when building something, a product, they don't really take much in consideration. How do you integrate that into your app building process? Is it a big part or
Yeah, so it is a big part, but it's also something that most people don't spend enough time, and and we often fall into that trap because you want to just get started and you want to put the work in, but the more work you put in initially, with the UI UX, any kind of mock-ups, wireframes. There's one product that we love is called Mockups with a Q, MOQ ups,
Okay.
and so it's actually free, but it allows you to basically design your app prior to actually spending any time coding it. So the more you have it clearly defined and being able someone to touch it and use it. Whether it's your clients, they could play with it. Whether it's a potential customer, you could show it to them. And a lot of these products are so sophisticated now that you could actually give them functionality. So you could actually design all your screens, put them on, if it's an iPhone, Android, iPad app, you actually design them on the iPad, Android, or iPhone, and then kind of have live links. So you could link, some specific button on, one mock-up to another. So it really feels like the app. So in terms of the UX point of view, the user experience, it's really about talking to people, who's your customer, getting them to use it, getting their feedback. I mean, there are obviously common principles we all try to stay up on. Apps are always changing. When Apple first started with their apps, remember everything was very photorealistic, with backgrounds and textures. And then I think iOS 7 kind of stopped it, where they went to more flatter looks.
Yes.
So it's like when you watch a TV show from the 70s, and everyone has the long hair and the bell bottoms. It's the same thing, although it's much quicker. Everything. The time frame then was like 10 years. Now it's like 1 or 2 years. But I think to stay on top of things, we don't do this anymore. But what we used to do is we used to actually create. We would go through tons and tons of apps, right? And we would take the best of each app in terms of the the interface, and we would take mock-ups of them, and we would make these photo books. So we had these really beautiful hard-covered books, and when we would go to a client, we would show them these books, and we had switches and forms and splash screens, and we kind of still do that informally. But it's really important to stay up on what works, what doesn't work. I mean, it's nice to reinvent the wheel if you could do it, but why not take the best practices of apps that are out there? I don't believe in stealing or just ripping off what other people have done, although you see this all the time, right? One app looks just like another. But certainly best practices and things that you like, make note of it and keep a repository somewhere. You asked about tools before. One of my favorite tools is Trello. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I am. It's actually pretty helpful.
So actually, we use it a lot.
Well, so Trello is great, right? I mean, it's a kind of a free-form kind of whiteboard. You could, create lists, and then within each list, you have cards, and each card could have, could be links and notes, and we sometimes use that for project management. But I love using that for like links. So we have specific boards. So I'll have SEO and WordPress plugins and great, UI ideas, whatever it is, right? Different lists, and it's a great place to collaborate, and you could tag somebody if you want them to see it, and that way you don't have to kind of keep notes or bookmark things. Just everything is always there. So I'm doing that probably every day. I'm doing 5 or 6 different cool, articles or things that I find. So things like that I think are important.
Nice. Yes. I think it's like a collaborative Wunderlist. I keep my Wunderlist for myself, and then the Trello it can be amongst workers. Nice.
That's a great tool.
And so, Scott, we have a question from one of my coworkers, Jose Padilla, and he asked us. His question is about when doing the pitch, when presenting the pitch. What do you do when there's a great idea, but the person doesn't do a good job presenting it? It probably the person makes it seem as it's not as a good idea as he's saying it, but what do you do as an investor? I want to get your side, and then what would your recommendation be to Jose as in the presenter side?
Sure. Well, so it depends what you mean by not job in presenting it. So there's 2 aspects to that, right? Either they're nervous, they're not a great presenter, that's fine. But are they somebody that could execute the idea? Do they have the know-how? Do they have the industry knowledge? Do they have the technology knowledge? So is it somebody that you would want to partner with, invest in, back in some way, even if it's just giving advice? So that's important. But often, maybe it's a good idea, but this is not the person to carry it, it out. So I think you have to distinguish between those 2 things. So it's much better to give a good presentation. So the first thing I would say is, you only get one chance to impress somebody. So, I think the premise of it, if it's a bad presentation, well, that's a problem. I used to be an investment banker, and we would give presentations all the time. And I've experienced sometimes firsthand somebody that either was presenting to me because I was advising the client. Sometimes we were a financial advisor to the client that was raising money, and bankers would pitch us, or we would pitch. And maybe I had a team. I mean, I could think of one example where were making this very big pitch. I mean, if we got the business, it would be like a $5-10 million a year project. And there was a guy, and he was an Ivy League graduate and great-looking guy, and I think he played Division I college basketball. I mean, super impressive guy. We had just hired him. And, we worked on the pitch together, and I'll never forget this. We went to do the pitch, and we walk in, and there was like 4 of us. So, someone spoke for 10 minutes, and I spoke for 10 minutes. Then it was this guy's turn, and oh my God, he just completely choked. I mean, it was crazy. He just started sweating, and he literally couldn't get a word out. So anyway, the point is that you need to be prepared. So, the premise of the question was, kind of to me, somewhat faulty, because you got one chance. It better be good. But if the idea is so great, sure. I mean, we'll try to figure out a way to make it work. But often it's really not about the idea, as I said before. It's really about the person that's giving the pitch.
Correct.
So it's an important part.
My advice to Jose would be to probably find someone better suited in his team to do the presentation, right?
Hey, let me mention one other thing I think is really important that's related to this conversation. So most people have an idea, okay, and even if they have funding, they're either going to do it themselves or they've raised some money to build it, right? They come in and they're like, okay, here's this idea, I want you guys to build it, or I'm going to build it, what do you think? And what they don't take into consideration is the fact that building the app, the website, the project, whatever it is to me the easy part. I mean, anyone could build something. It's the execution after that, and people don't take that into consideration. It's like, okay, what I always say is, they have this idea, and I say, okay, let's fast forward. Let's say it's going to take, we're going to build it. It's going to take 3 or 4 months. It's going to cost exactly what you think it's going to cost, and it's going to be exactly what you want it to be. Okay, so now we're 4 months into the future. Now what? What do you do? So you have this great thing that's sitting there. There's a million things that are sitting there. What are you going to do? And people don't take this into consideration, that it might take 2 to 3 times as much money, a full-time team, to make this thing a success. Mm-hmm. And I think you need to realize that it isn't just building something from a technology standpoint. Of course, that's important, but can you turn this into a viable product with paying customers, or at least users, even if it's a free, a lot of these things start off free, but could you get people that want to use it, that use it every day, that will help you make this thing viral? How do you get that to happen? It doesn't just happen. It isn't about, I know, usually the common thing, refrain is, I know someone who has a big Facebook, big Twitter following. So that's, everyone thinks that, I know Lady Gaga. Probably 5 or 6 people have told me, oh, I know Lady Gaga. She has 10 million followers. A quick example. So one of our claims to fame is we did an app with Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut. And it kind of put us on the map with Apple, because Apple was their big space guys and they loved Buzz Aldrin, and it really got us at the highest level at Apple because we did this. In fact, Buzz knew Bob Iger. A little funny story. Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story was kind of Buzz didn't get paid for it, but they're using his name, so I think to keep him happy, they make him the marshal at the annual Disney parade, and Bob Iger takes his phone calls. So Buzz called Bob, who introduced us to the head of the App Store, who we went up there and met them, and this is when we were building this app. We did an app called the Buzz Aldrin. It's a portal to science and space exploration, and it was a pretty good size success. Anyway, the interesting thing there is that when we were promoting it, Buzz has a lot of followers. I think he had about 1 million followers directly on Twitter. But there was another guy who had like 4 or 5 million followers, and we had him be part of the app a little bit. And he's the guy that actually helped fix the Hubble space station, and he was in that movie prominently. So we had him tweet for us a couple of times, and he has, say, 4 or 5 million followers, and this is a free app, about space, and Buzz was in it, and this guy was in it, and maybe we got a couple of 100 downloads from him tweeting it to 4 million people, but that's about it. So, and this, you couldn't be more, the target couldn't have been better, right? This guy has 4 million active followers that follow him because of space. This was a space app that was free, that was so useful. And the app was successful, but not because we got, because of hard work, constant PR, figuring out lots of viral ways of doing it, which is really, I think, a key thing we could talk about. But again, going back, is all I'm trying to say is don't just rely on, hey, I'm going to build something really good, and that's it. Realize, and most people has full-time jobs also, so that's another thing we ask. Okay, you're going to build it, or you're going to contract with us to build it. Now what? You're competing in this market space with teams of people that are living, breathing, they're not even sleeping, and they're competing against you, and you have a full-time job. How are you going to make this thing successful? It isn't just outsourcing this project to you guys or to us to build it for you. Now what? We'll build it for you. You guys will build it for your client, but then what?
Got it. And
Okay.
I have one last question.
True.
Okay. We've talked about your history, and you learn a lot from success, but there's also a chance to learn from mistakes. There's this initiative in my city. It's called Fuck Up Nights, when they invite people and they tell a story about a company that failed, So my question to you is, do you have any experience of an app that you were sure that it was going to be a big hit? It's a great idea, the market's there, very defined, but it failed. And can you tell us what did you recognize that failed, and what did you learn from that experience?
Let me tell you two stories. So one is a website. So I was an investor and on the board of a company called Opposing Views, and I thought the idea was great. So basically, a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur, very successful, founded this company, asked me to kind of come on board. And the concept was it was going to be a website where people and organizations that were well known, that were on different sides of various common topics. It could be the environment, is global warming real, politics, an election, gay rights, whatever it happens to be. Get two organizations that are on opposite sides, and they're going to go on this platform that we were going to build, and they were going to be kind of debating. It was going to be, it wasn't necessarily live, although there would be a live aspect, but it would be a really cool platform that they could each put in their, views. They could go back and forth over the course of weeks. Normal people, people that are watching could kind of chime in. Now, it's somewhat original. There are other things like it, but there was nothing really specifically this, focus. But here's what I loved about the idea. Inherent in the idea was the marketing of it, and here's what I mean by that. So we would have two big organizations. It could be the NRA, the National Rifle Association, and the groups that oppose it. So we had these big ideas. You had people that they lived and breathed, these specific issues, like their whole life. These people that go to blogs and they protest and they are watching, CNN or MSNBC or whatever it happens to be, and that's what they do each day. So when their heroes, the people that they believe in, were on this site, they're going to go on, full force and support them, and they're going to blog about it and talk about it. And the converse is also true. If they're against this, right now we're in the middle of our election in the United States. So we have Trump as a very decisive figure and divisive figure, and obviously Mexico also, or more so even. But so when Trump talks, you have his backers that are big for him, but when there's obviously people that are just as strong against him. So that was the concept. So the way this friend of mine kind of pitched me the idea was, what they're going to do is they're going to kind of own that space. They're going to know, whatever the topic was, they're going to know every single, online and offline organization that kind of talks about that idea, right? So anytime we did something, we would let them know that, this person is going to be, blogging or talking. Anyway, so it was pretty amazing. We launched, raised a decent amount of money. We launched, and literally this is when Google had page ranking. It was more of a big thing.
Yep.
It rose from a brand new site to a PR of 7, literally within 3 months. I mean, it was unheard of. But why was that? Because we had locked up 1 million of these organizations, and every time that they would be on the site debating, we would get dozens and dozens of high authoritarian links from these .org type sites, right? So I mean, we had thousands of of high authority domains within months. So it was a great idea. We were building. So one of the what I was saying before is one of the problems with people don't understand is you need to have a good management be able to pivot. So basically, what happened to us is that we had built up this pretty quickly. We had a big staff. We were flying high, and then this was in kind of the early 2008 timeframe. Anyway, the funding market fell apart on us. So we had a pretty big organization. We were about 6-8 months live, and we were ready to do our next round. I mean, we were doing it quickly, so we were spending the money because we already had locked up a second round, and it fell apart on us. So I guess the lesson there, a long story because I thought it was interesting, but the lesson there is make sure you have kind of a plan B, right? Because often, you need funding, right? That's almost why I say try to be lean and mean to start with. Don't do necessarily this unless you really need to run with it, because the markets could dry up on you. So that would be a good example of that. And then I have a technology example. So at the app company, one of our first things that we built, it was called Video Hunters. So YouTube was popular. Google had a YouTube app that came in when you got an iPhone, but it was pretty limited. I mean, you could search, and it isn't actually that different than what they have today. I mean, it's fine. You could search and bookmark and all that stuff, and obviously view videos. But we came up with this idea. It was called Video Hunters, and the concept was you could kind of curate your videos. So you go to YouTube, you could search for things, and you could create like topics on your app. So let's just say I'm a coach of Little League. I could have a whole stream of videos about coaching and hitting. If I'm into gardening, I could have that as a topic. And actually, at any time something new that matches a certain search phrase would automatically come up in these various streams, right? Then you could share it with people, and you could subscribe to other people's stuff. And Apple loved it. We were featured, multiple times by Apple. It did really well. But we outsourced it. This is kind of the early days when we were doing it. We were very lean and mean. We didn't have a full-time staff, and it was very complicated technology. And we spent a lot of money. We had hired this one company to do it, and we were kind of naive. We didn't really understand, that they were kind of going down the wrong road. It was very inefficient. It was hard to maintain. We ended up probably spent close to $100,000. We had to scrap it. We kind of took it in-house, but by that time it just got very frustrating. Anyway, so the point of that story is we had a really good idea. We could have raised a lot of money, but we tried to do it ourselves. But we didn't spend enough time kind of understanding were we using the right technology? Was it efficient? Was it easy to maintain? Was it using the most common standards? And kind of so the technology wasn't quite there. And by the time we kind of realized that we had spent a lot of money, and we probably should have went back to it, but we had. We were starting off in our game day stuff and having a lot of success back then, so we didn't do it. But I guess those would be two, lessons that we learned: the funding, the technology.
Valuable lessons.
Okay, guys, I have one question actually from another fellow near Softian who he typed it on Skype. By the way, he didn't do it in the Q&A window. This is from Rafael Gutierrez, one of our guys here, also in Mexico City. He says, what if we want to introduce us or ourselves to a specific market that we don't know? What can we do? What should we do?
So I think the most important thing is if you don't know the market, first question is it really something you want to be doing? Because as I said before, I mean, the one thing that you could bring to, I'll get back to what you would do, but I really would stress, if you don't know that market, really think a couple of times, do you really even want to venture into it? Because we all have our experiences and know things, and I think that would be what I would suggest you focus on. But that said, if you have a great idea, you really think it's going to work, I mean, learn the market. I mean, really, meet people in the market. If you could partner with someone that's already in the market, that would be great. That would be the best thing. But short of that, learn the market. I mean, go online, and we have Google and the web. It's really not that hard to figure out. Figure out who the important players are. Figure out where do people in that market, get their information. I mean, is there an industry rag that everyone uses every morning? They wake up and they go to some, most of us go to, if we're in, a specific market, there's some couple of websites we go to, right, that give the information. I mean, we all go to like TechCrunch and places like that, right? Well, in that market, what's the TechCrunch of that market, right? Where do they go to learn? who are the information leaders, who are the thought leaders, what are the success. Who's your we didn't really talk about competitors, but clearly know who your competitors are, right? Also, here's a big thing. We're often getting pitched ideas, and people didn't do their research. There's already 4 or 5 ideas exactly like that idea already. I mean, a quick story. I told you about this game day platform. So we had a meeting at Angel Stadium here, and we were meeting with an agent and a player that was on the Angels. And it was about 2 hours before a game. We were in Angel Stadium here in Anaheim. And there's a little dining room area, so while they were doing batting practice, we're meeting with the agent, waiting for the player to be available. And the president of the Angels came, introduced himself to us, and was interested in us doing an app. Anyway, long story short, he had this idea, and it was a good idea. I mean, I'm not going to say what it was, but we thought to ourselves, well, this is a really good idea. We went home, went on the App Store, spent not that much time, and realized there's like 6 or 7 apps that are already doing that. Now, if you could think of a better reason to do it, sure. It happened to me once. We all have this issue. We park our car, at a mall or at a sporting event, and then we aren't really paying attention, and we come back and we can't find our car, right? There's a famous Seinfeld episode like that.
Yeah.
So this happened to me once. I was at a racetrack. It was the Breeders' Cup. A friend of mine invited me. And as I get it was like 5 or 6 years ago, so apps weren't that popular, and I'm making note of them on E23, where I am. I'm like, oh my God, this would be a great app to be able to, just take a picture, do GPS, show me where I am. I'm like, wow, what a great idea. And I'm walking to the stadium, to this racetrack, and I called my partner. I'm all excited. Oh, I got this great idea, blah, blah. Well, anyway, when we got in, I kind of did a little bit of Google searching, and there must have been 20 apps that did that. So at least I spent, for 5 minutes I was all excited. But a lot of people will spend all this time on their idea and not even, bother searching.
Yep.
So, do some research. Make sure there's nothing like that out there.
In a nutshell, just do your homework before you actually do anything. Okay. Listen, Scott, we're a few minutes away from wrapping up, and I understand that you have to be leaving soon. So if I just finally ask you to just a few words that you would like to leave our audience with regarding today's topic, which one would these be?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things that I focused on. I mean, vitamin versus painkiller. Is this something that's really satisfying a need? I mean, who's your market? I mean, you have this great idea. I mean, but really understand, is the market, if it's not something that you're from, I said earlier, do something you're familiar with. But if you're not familiar, make sure you become an expert in that area. And is there a need? Talk to people in that market. Let them know about what your idea is, and see how excited are they. And don't get too married to your idea. I think that's a real big one.
Mm-hmm.
Often we have this idea, and then we tell people, and they tell you either they're friends of yours, and they, be careful who you're talking to. Friends will just tell you, oh, it's great, it's great. Friends and relatives. Try to pitch somebody that isn't necessarily your friend, or someone that's gonna, give you tough love and be honest with you, and be willing to listen to what people are saying. I mean, we all make this mistake, right? We're so strong with our idea, we tell people, and then they're not as excited about it as us, right? Well, if you keep on doing that, and people are constantly not that excited, maybe the idea is not that exciting. So, listen. Be sure to listen. And then the last thing I want to say, which I think is critical, especially for your market, the technologists, realize that it's not just about building the idea. It's about, okay, you're going to build it, now what? Keep on asking yourself, now what? Do you have the money, the resources, the team to take that finished technology product and turn it into a winner? So make sure you think it through, not just building it.
Excellent. That's a great piece of advice, particularly considering that there's quite a few people here near South that are currently engaged in building things and creating intellectual property and so on and so forth. But I think, but unfortunately, we're running out of time now. So what I'd like to do now is thank you, Scott, so much. And you and I are going to be in touch, and I'll be, like I said, sending you these little things here I already mentioned, and there's pretty much it for today. I want to thank your audience, and especially Luis too, for having being here as well. Your help was priceless. And
Not a problem.
yeah, sure. And I just want to again, Scott, thank you so much. And I look forward to being in touch and to probably do this again sometime in the future.
Great, thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Luis. It was been my pleasure. And if anyone has any questions or wants to brainstorm, I mean, feel free, contact me.
Sure. Where can our viewers contact you? Do you have like a Twitter or an email, something that you can share with us?
Sure. So my app company email is Scot. I spell my name with one T, SCOT, at theappcompany.com.
Hold on one second. That would be. Okay, I'm just going to share with everybody. Would you mind repeating it for us?
Sure. Scot, SCOT, at theappcompany.com. Or just feel free to visit the appcompany.com website, and there's a contact form. Feel free to just do it that way.
Okay. And folks, here's where you can actually contact Scott.
That's it.
Here it is.
Great.
All right. Well, again, Scott, thank you so much for being here with us today. We'll be in touch and talk to you soon. You have a wonderful day, Scott, and you too.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for your time, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks.